Tonight, I really want to thank and offer my humblest appreciation to you all for this opportunity for myself to share something that has been with me for some time. Just the rollout of this evening with the other speakers and the topics, even Brene Brown's talk in terms of vulnerability seems to be so appropriate in this subject that is so personal. It's intensely public. In fact, the observations began today in schools with the color orange, as you know. Tomorrow is the official day of acknowledging and remembering children, those lost children of the residential schools. Certainly my family comes from this history. But over time, I've really developed and investigated and questioned reality in such a way that is this story to date, even as the TRC's work and such that is beginning to unfold and share and educate, is there still something else? Is there still something else that we can see to this that may help us bypass so much of the reiterations of textbooks, of stories, of presentations, even such as mine, that can speak right to that heart in those moments that we all know about riding the bike or remembering how to swim, or for those of us, who, mothers in the room, or you remember your own parents, when we come into this world, we'll never forget that day. And certainly we don't forget the day that we leave this world. So before I begin to get to this topic, I want to give you a little context. Certainly is how I ground myself in where I have framed this subject, this idea, and where I would acknowledge the person who began this journey for me. And this is my grandfather, my Tunkashila. His name is Phil Lane Sr.
The old people had a great viewpoint on gaining an education, so to speak. And they realized that wisdom, as opposed to knowledge, there was a vast difference. So you can go to school, and learn a lot, you can gain a lot of knowledge, but unless there's wisdom in it, it really doesn't have that much meaning. And that was one of the things that the old people were very high on. And so that's the reason why they had you could go to old people. Tunkashila, grandfather, tell us about such and such, you see. And those old men would sit down there, hey, like that. And they would tell you a story, and you wonder how that story hooked into what the lesson was. And eventually, all of a sudden, it would come to you like that and say, oh, I see now, you see. I see what they were trying to teach me. We learned so much through the old people as opposed to the little school we went to. I went to a school and the bell would ring and everybody leave and I just go home because but the knowledge that they were passing out down there didn't have that much meaning to me, and I think that the wisdom of those old people had so much more to offer as far as a person living out his life.
That story he told when he was first taken to school, and no one told him that when the bell rings and you go to your classroom and he would stand in the hallway, the bell would go and everyone would disappear and he'd be standing around and he'd just walk back home. He always loved this question. He would ask it all the time in statement and presentation, and almost perhaps as a bit of a seed that he planted with all of us to help us understand that despite all the culture, the teachings, our relationship in the language is called Techi Hokshila, which means the boy beloved, which the first grandson traditionally would receive so much of the guidance and teachings from the old ones. His travels in the Army Corps of Engineers, his building of a ranch far away from his home, and yet this question that he would always pose seemed to allow for us to know that we're once again a culture of humanity, despite our different places that we come from. The things that he also tried to teach me, he tried to teach me to be a cowboy, but I fell off the horse one too many times for my own comfort, so I didn't take that very far. I'd like to now speak about my father, Jacob Morris Bighorn. This is a man who, to me, exemplified what a teacher was, an educator. And they say that teachers save their best lessons to the end. And that's certainly true of my father in his last breath.
There are 35 of these homemade arrows that have been distributed to staff members. I'd like for you to remember who those staff members are. You see the names on the wall there. They're to represent a foundation. Those names are the bricks of a foundation. Your names are up in the clouds. Next year, that's all that's going to remain of you here at Maxwell is the sound of your name. Your bodies are gone. Most of the staff members will still be here. They will be nurturing the character of other young people. But just as they did with you, they are the foundation of your character. What they did for you in the classroom, even when you didn't know it. Late at night at home, preparing your lessons, having discussions with other staff members about how they could help you. Or your parents, some of them are your parents who are staff members. All the activities, those that have been here for 6 years, 5 years, 4, 3, 2, and 1. 1 year is still over 175 days. And in all of those experiences, the effort, I think the effort was to create, you see that target, was to create straight arrows. Your character was going to be a straight arrow, and that whatever you aim for, you would achieve.
My father used to love asking this question of his students. How would I get my students to value that which they know without knowing how they know it? Now, I never learned martial arts, and he didn't know it either, but I still think he really had a relationship with Mr. Miyagi with this kind of stuff. And the way that he was able to transmit, in my opinion, the essence of traditional Indigenous culture and teachings and spirituality in such a way that those seniors who had just come off, they had graduated already, and they just come off their all-night kind of going out and hanging out and everything. So they were already dead tired. They'd already been crying all day. And then my parents used to do this circle where they would really give it to them, because this was a boarding school as well, so students had lived there, grown relationships, etc. So they really would bawl their eyes out. This painting is called Jacob's Eagles. This quick story I'd like to share just in regards to this last lesson he's given me. Certainly in his life, he set a bar of achievement that I'll spend the rest of mine trying to get there. But he set it in death, which I don't know if I'll ever get to. So he beat me there. I'm going to have words with him when I get to the other side camp. And he did it in such a way that you can't write this stuff. And I think it's something that, as I pass down to my children and otherwise, to remember that there's a way to live this life. There's a way to see things that perhaps can tell you about those other dimensions. So this story from this Coast Salish artist who painted this picture, it's on this massive mural called the Unity Wall in Ogden Point in Victoria, BC. And she said, in October 2008, my father lay dying of cancer in a Victoria hospital. Across from his room lay Jacob Bighorn from the Lakota tribe, a man of strong spiritual beliefs and a native Bahá'í. Jacob often told those for whom he cared, if you live a life of service to your people, the eagles will come to guide your spirit when it's time to leave this earth. One morning, as my mother headed to the hospital, she noticed dozens of bald eagles flying across the water and over the highway. We too, on our way to Victoria, noticed many eagles circling the hospital. When we arrived, my father told us Jacob had passed on. Many people called the hospital asking if a holy man had passed away. Now, he wouldn't appreciate that, and he certainly wouldn't consider himself that, but he knew about eagles, and he knew about what they meant.
Another key element is that there you see an eagle staff. Mr. Murray is holding the staff, and you might consider there are no feathers, and we say, yes, there is a feather. There's one feather from one eagle. And if you've ever seen an eagle outstretched his 6-foot wingspan, and if you've seen them in particular out on the prairies, high, high, high up in the sky, during the summer months especially, you see them circling, circling. And most people say, with their sharp eyesight, they are looking to the ground for food. Another way of looking at this, and the interpretation was, wait a minute, no, what they are doing, because they're such spiritual beings, is they're cutting a hole. They're cutting a hole between this world and the next world, because they're spiritual beings. And when you see them, you are being blessed with this opportunity to access the powers of the next world.
He goes on to share that it's very risky to engage in these kinds of things. And we have examples all over the world of spirituality and practices that are, whether they're fanatical, superficial, superstitious, traditional, ritual, etc., but allow a people and perhaps an entire nation to move one way or the other based on a vision. And in this case, he goes on to describe that perhaps through that hole, through that access, you can see your future that you may have always wanted, or that future that you've been trying to avoid all your life. And so in my case, and I respectfully blame somebody in this audience who I've been married to for the past 10 years, she brought me up to Winnipeg, and between her and I, we've been working rather hard at this to become parents, where this quote from this film, "Now we're here just to be memories for our kids. Once you're a parent, you're the ghost of your children's future." So my wife and I have effectively killed each other because of these people. Now, the oldest is 10, the youngest will be 2 in a week, and this guy here is 7. And over time, if you're a parent, and this is, of course, I call my mother, who's still alive, every other day to say, okay, I get it, I understand, I'm sorry. Because they bring so much of an understanding of future in a way than that quote in that film. I tried to read Kip Thorne's book, and I couldn't get through it. I'll have to read yours. That it just made so much sense. There's no need anymore for the rest of my life. What is the purpose of anything that I could acquire for myself with them here? And so it helped me bring me to a point of really understanding this question and the point of this presentation, and a real terror in a history of my ancestry, a history that we're really struggling with, a history that we'll observe tomorrow that may have just another way of looking at it. As we all know, 500 some years ago, we had some folks row a boat over here. They thought they were going one way, they ended up over here. And they described this place as the New World, paradise. There was an elder named Ernest Tutusis in Poundmaker who also described the same story and tied it to another ancient story which comes out of a book, a very old book, Genesis. And he described that the reason why the peoples of this land were living in such a way that they were is because they never disobeyed their Creator. In effect, they were never kicked out of paradise. And I always used to that really worked on me a lot, because certainly, again, with this history of this part of the world, with the church and such, it's hard to tease apart the truths of both messages and understand the balance between these spiritual understandings of how to view the world around us, of things that we can't see, like the access my father was talking about. These children who I could have said they were going to be in my life 20 years ago, I might have children, here they are, my life is over, what's next? So I really am interested in trying to understand why Native peoples in particular in this part of the land had to go through this history, and more importantly, why did all of you come to this part of the world? And Ernest's story helped answer that. I mean, if this is paradise, well, it makes sense. Everybody came. That's why Native people haven't left. I mean, why haven't we had an exodus to the Bahamas or sought asylum in Amsterdam? Why are we still here? Well, this must be paradise. So it led me to another question of thinking of if this is paradise, if all the troubles that we know are happening, what more could there be? What are we working for? If we think of this place, and of course only in 1968 or 9, I believe, was the first time we even saw this place. We know of this place. I don't recall, or I don't know when the technology was available for the first time to see where we all came from. And of course the relationship between the two, and how we all fit in this space and wrap together to say that we are a part of all worlds simultaneously, and at the same time have our own experience, our own individuality, our own world that we came into. And so if paradise is the womb for that fetus, what is birth? If this is paradise for us and what we think we can make it, what is death? And when I think of this history of ours and where we go from here and how it could be woven together like this sweetgrass, the only reason why some of these, of smudge and we have ceremony is so that we can create a transformation, a transfiguration, if you will, from something material to something spiritual. And easy to say we burn it, turns to smoke and smudge, and something occurs. Just like we heard sounds with technology that we can't hear right now, but it exists. You burn that smudge and wafts over you, something occurs. If it's possible to say that this history of our people here was to bear the burden of the pain of the world, to come back to paradise, if you will, come back to the garden, to be embraced in such a way that we have no precedent in our history of this kind of treatment, famine, war, anger, hatred, pain, shame, all the language that we've heard throughout the presentations. Perhaps the purpose is because that we will consume one another, we will wrap ourselves around one another. I hope it's not nuclear fire, but something that consumes our identities, consumes our histories, to reveal something transformed and something new. It's taken me a long time as an Indigenous person to come to terms with that. Consume my language, consume my ceremonies, consume my grandfather and my father. But if there was a chance that it could lead to something beyond what I already love about my culture, this country, this planet, my wife, my children, if there's something beyond that, I would hope that I would have one more shot to get there. After watching my father accomplish it, after watching my wife accomplish it 3 times, number 4, right? We're going to try again. That for the future of either Canada, North America, and certainly our planet, there could be something there if we're willing to let those things burn away to reveal new forms. Thank you.